Darian Fenton.
Yeah, well, it's a privilege to take a call on the Canterbury Earthquake Commemoration Day bill, and I want to start by paying my respects to all of those that have lost their lives and their families, all of those that have been injured, all of those who are still struggling just to get along in their homes, all of those who've lost homes. Just the sheer enormity of this disaster, I think, it strikes all of us. Even those like me who have not been to Christchurch since the tragedy. I think all of us throughout New Zealand have been struggling to come to terms with this horrendous event. I also want to acknowledge all of the ministers, and particularly the Minister of Labour, who I know lives in Christchurch, and thank her for bringing this bill, even though we have some reservations, very small ones, about the timing of it. We think it is a very good gesture, and I think an appropriate one in the circumstances. There is genuine grief and sadness throughout the country. It will last for some time to come. There will be many times in the future when people will also need support. Well, they need it now, but they'll continue to need it. We must make sure that the Commemoration Day commemorates those who've lost their lives, takes care of the families that are suffering, but we also must look to the future and continue to work together to help rebuild Christchurch, because it does affect us all. We are all in this together. It is something that all of those who live today will not forget easily or quickly. My grandfather was in the Napier earthquake, Mr. Speaker, and he talked about it a lot because he was a minister at the time. He was a minister of religion, and he had to immediately leave his family of 4 and go and help his parishioners. And my father, who was just a little boy, relates the story of how he was at school and was walking away from the building and turned around and there was an enormous crevice behind him. And he ended up with a little ticket, almost like a little refugee ticket, that helped get access to food and other things. But both my grandfather and father were enormously affected by that. Both of them had been through world wars, but that was the thing they talked much more about when we talked about tragedies and awful things that had happened in their lifetimes. So, Mr. Speaker, I think it is an appropriate response to a tragedy. In my words this afternoon, in my first reading speech, I do want to dedicate it to the workers of Canterbury, because many of the people that have been killed and lost or have been injured were just ordinary working people who were going about their jobs. It was tragic that it happened at lunchtime, as it did. Some had stepped outside and gone to lunch and were caught in Cashel Mall. Others had just come back, just got back into their buildings and the buildings collapsed. They were just people that went to work in the morning, said goodbye to their families, never to be seen again. And that is just utterly heartbreaking. We mourn all of those workers, the dead, the injured, the lost, but also we mourn with all of the people that are affected. I also want to acknowledge all of the workers that have been at the forefront of the rescue effort in Christchurch. And I thank the Minister of Police for her contribution today. It's pretty gruelling stuff to listen to, and it must be even more gruelling to be working on the front line of retrieving the lost and trying to get them back to their families. Pretty gruesome job, and I thank them for being there to do that, because it's an important part of families being able to have closure, is getting their loved ones home and being able to say goodbye to them. Of course, there are firefighters and rescue workers, health workers, social support workers, education workers, community workers, an enormous effort that has gone in from the working people of Christchurch and indeed around the country. And people have mentioned, for example, MSD workers. You know, I tried to contact my local MSD in Northcote the other day, and the message was, we're all working on Christchurch. Well, that's fair enough, I understand that. So it just shows you the effort that went in, and I really appreciate it. Helen Clark, our former Prime Minister, when she visited Christchurch, said it was worse than Haiti. And I'm sure it is in terms of the devastation. But what's not worse is the fact that we live in a country that's a democracy, that has great public services, that has a government and a parliament that is able to work together and is actually wealthy enough to be able to get through this, because we will get through this. So we're not having to witness this dreadful things, the dreadful scenes that we've seen in Haiti post-earthquake. There are many stories that will emerge in the weeks to come of workers who were absolute heroes. And let me say, I'm not just talking about workers. I know there were many heroes, but I'm particularly wanting to talk about them. I heard of workers who helped workmates out through the rubble, over the bricks, put their own lives at risk to help other people who they were working with. Thousands of workers have volunteered along with the rest of the community to help in a variety of ways despite their own losses, despite the fact that they may have lost a loved one or have one missing, or have lost their homes or are living in absolute devastation. Caregivers help relocate hundreds of older people from aged care facilities to other parts of the country. And can you imagine what it was like for those who live with disabilities, and particularly those with intellectual disabilities living in the family homes? It would have been caregivers that comforted them, that looked after them. Nurses rolled up their sleeves and went off to work, reported for duty and got stuck in, as indeed, of course, did doctors. And so I think it is really, as I said, very appropriate that we set aside a day to mourn the losses. And it's appropriate that it's a public holiday because there is no other way that we can be sure that the workers of Christchurch are able to attend. There is no other way. As others have said, we do have some questions about whether it's the right time, but I don't want to go into that too much at the moment. I also want to, like my colleague Trevor Mallard, want to ensure that the frontline workers, the police officers, the health workers and rescue workers are able to attend. I feel a little bit concerned that they'll be needed elsewhere, and I think I would appreciate the cooperation of the government in trying to get a message through that it's very important for them because it's for them as much as anyone else. Imagine what they've witnessed and they've been through in the last few couple of weeks. There are consequences, of course, to this earthquake, Mr. Speaker. I don't want to go into them too much, but there are thousands of workers who are now out of a job, and there are a lot of businesses that no longer exist. There are many on the margins. And so there will be questions, I think, as we go through the next few weeks about that. I do want to say, though, while I have the opportunity, that the government's response and emergency package was far more generous than last time, and I know it's been taken up in tens of thousands, and something like 50 million's been given out so far, and I think I congratulate them for that. There are some other issues around that response package. I don't intend to go into them now, maybe a little bit later in the debate, but can I just reiterate my genuine sorrow and sadness about this dreadful event, and give my outer heart to the people of Canterbury and to the people in this House who are suffering, and to all of us in New Zealand who are going to have to stand together to get through this.
The Honourable